Valerie Bertinelli says, cocaine was everywhere in the 80s during her days with Eddie Van Halen. As she reflects on toll his demon addiction took on their marriage. Valerie Bertinelli confessed that cocaine was everywhere and easy to get during her days with the late Eddie Van Halen in the 1980s. The 61-year-old actress married the rock star in 1981 and ultimately divorced him in 2007 after his addictions took a toll on their marriage. She discussed their drug use on the podcast Literally with Rob Lowe, where Rob himself also touched on his own history with substance abuse and reflected that he and Valerie were lucky that we got off the ride. While Valerie and Eddie were together, she became acquainted with the drug-fueled orbit of his world-famous band Van Halen. However, Valerie, a sitcom star on One Day at a Time, was not entirely integrated into the scene as once Ed and I became involved. All of a sudden there was this rule that there was no girlfriends and no wives allowed on the road. She joked that the band weren't interested in eating, that's for sure, and added, "Well, I am a prude now, but I partaked as well for a few years until I just couldn't take it anymore." Sick. Noting, cocaine was everywhere, and easy to get. Rob, who became a movie star in the 1980s, Brat Pack, admitted that, "We all took cocaine in that era as it was before the bill had come due and we just didn't know." He remembered that people were saying it was good for you, it helped you think, and the other thing was it was what successful people did in our industry. It was all the people you admired did. Rob argued that if you're Eddie Van Halen, what do you think Keith Richards was doing? You know, if I'm a young actor, I don't want to name a name, but multiple names, I know what those actors were doing, and you're like, oh, well, if it's good enough for so-and-so, it's good enough for me, right? Valerie eventually got tired after a while of hating the birds chirping, because I got to a point where when I would hear birds chirping I would just get so tense. And it took me years before I enjoyed a sunrise and enjoyed the birds chirping. Rob's libertine lifestyle of the 1980s caught up with him after a sex tape emerged of him with two girls in Georgia, where he was campaigning for Michael Dukakis. He was 24 and one of the girls was 16, meaning she was past the age of consent in Georgia but too young to legally appear in a sex tape. Rob, who allegedly met her at a nightclub and insisted he thought she was an adult, managed to avoid criminal charges and settle a lawsuit with the girl's family. 2 years after the tape, which resulted in a massive scandal that nearly torpedoed his career, Rob went to rehab for alcoholism and has remained sober since. He told Valerie on his podcast that we're lucky that we got off the ride. You know, 'cause a lot of people follow it all the way down. His theory is that it's better to like crash and burn than to have it never than to be incrementally boiled alive by it like a frog. You know, the sort of the frog that you keep turning the temperature up in the water. It will let itself get boiled alive, because it doesn't, you know? Rob contended that, that's what I think. What happens to a lot of people who can recreationally dabble and do their thing, and they never really have the piper never gets paid, and so they keep doing it, and then they're 60, 60 plus, 70, and wondering why their lives are horrible. Eddie's addiction took a lonely form while the rest of Van Halen would enjoy wild nights out after shows. He would indulge in vodka and cocaine alone at the hotel. Eventually he got sober in 2008, the year after his divorce from Valerie was finalized, but he died in late 2020 at the age of 65 after a battle with throat cancer. "I didn't drink to party. Alcohol and cocaine were private things to me," he told Billboard in an interview years after he went on the wagon. "I would use them for work. The blow keeps you awake and the alcohol lowers your inhibitions. I'm sure there were musical things I would not have attempted were I not in that mental state," he shared with the publication. Valerie told Rob, "Well, I think we all have a toolbox that we go to when we need to suppress any kind of emotion that we don't want to feel, any kind of pain that we don't want to feel, and I know that Ed's toolbox was full of drugs and alcohol." She explained, "My toolbox was full of food, which I thought was love, and I misused it and thought it was the enemy for a long time. And with Ed it was drugs and alcohol, and it took a very, very long time for him to just not use it to deal with his pain. Near the end of his life, his pain was incredibly raw and he was very vulnerable about it." Valerie, who had an amicable relationship with her ex-husband after the divorce, said, "And I'm grateful that he was able to make amends with so many people that he loved and knew that he didn't treat as well as he would have liked to." She went on, "Because his heart, oh my God. That man's heart was just so kind and so sweet, and he just wanted to do good, and then that demon would come in, that wouldn't let him just be Ed. It was hard to watch." With hindsight, she regarded herself as also having been too immature. "I was too into my own world to know how to help." Valerie, who shares a 30-year-old son called Wolf with Eddie, said, "I was a kid. We were 20 when I got married. That's insane.